Hello and welcome to our London History Podcast, where we share our love of London, its people, places and history. This podcast is designed for you to learn things about London that most Londoners don't even know, all in 20 minutes. I am your host, Hazel Baker, qualified London tour guide and CEO of londonguidedwalks.co.uk. If you like what you hear, then please rate and review on Apple or Google Podcasts. Thank you to all of you who have left a review. It's really very much appreciated. You can support our work and the unique content we provide from as little as £5. For more information of how to support us and or to access recommended readings and related blog posts, please go to londonguidedwalks.co.uk/podcast. Get that cup of tea, put your feet up and enjoy. Today we're going to be talking about Benjamin Franklin and his London life. In 1757, having made his fortune in Philadelphia and established his name as a renowned experimental scientist, Benjamin Franklin crossed the Atlantic and came back to London, this time to live life as a gentleman. He settled in a house in Craven Street, not too far from Trafalgar Square. And it's from this address, where the famous US statesman lived and conducted numerous important experiments, such as exploring daylight saving time and redesigning bifocal lenses. It's also from here where he mixed with brilliant minds of the day, including Scottish philosopher David Hume and English manufacturer Matthew Boulton. And he counted physician and philosopher Erasmus Darwin as a trusted friend. There is one special place in London that has a strong connection with Franklin, and that is Benjamin Franklin House, which is a museum in a terraced Georgian house on Craven Street and is the world's only remaining home of Benjamin Franklin. The house itself dates from about 1730 and is a Grade 1 listed property. Since opening to the public on the 17th of January 2006, Franklin's 300th birthday, the house has welcomed more than 140,000 visitors. We covered Franklin first coming to London in 1724 as a teenager in episode 30, Little Britain. And so today I am delighted to welcome Dr. Márcia Balisciano to join us and tell us more about his London life and the wonderful Benjamin Franklin house. So thanks for joining me today, Márcia. I'm really excited to talk about this. So why don't you tell us a little bit about Benjamin Franklin House?
It is showcasing a wonderful story about Franklin in London, because to the extent that people know anything about Benjamin Franklin, they may not know that, as you said in your introduction, that the only house still standing is not in Boston, where he was born, not in his adopted city of Philadelphia, nor in Paris and Passy, where he was only 8 years during the American Revolution, but it is this house in London, just in the heart of the city, that still stands. But that show is using technology that we think really would have interested Benjamin Franklin, who said he was born a couple hundred years too soon. So we have a kind of showpiece for 21st century technology in a Grade 1 listed 18th century building. And we use live performance, a character from Franklin's London household, Polly. And then we also have visual imagery that pops up and sound to really make it an immersive experience, almost as if you've gone back in time. So that's one thing we do. We also have a student science center focused on engaging young people and children on Franklin's inventiveness. And in fact, our mission is to bring history and innovation to life. And then our top floor, where that show control system is, we call the Robert H. Smith Scholarship Center, and that's under the auspices of where we bring the intellectual capital of the house with about 40 public events every year to a wide audience.
That sounds fantastic. So it sounds like your core three principles, run through everything that you do.
Yes, those are really at the heart of our offerings, but there's a lot of value-added activities that we do as well under the auspices, for example, of our Student Science Center. We have family days. We do a literary prize for young writers, which is endowed by our chair, John Studzinski. So we give a prize for a young writer under the age of 25, and then a second prize, also a cash prize as well, to recognize their work and pick up on Franklin's excellence as a writer. He was a great polymath. He did pretty much everything, but his greatest way of sharing his ideas was through the pen. He was not known as being a great orator. So there's a lot of crossover in the three things that we do, but really at the heart of it is about engaging people in the history of Benjamin Franklin House, and also doing our part to share the legacy of this very fascinating individual who still has something to teach all of us, I believe.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point. Now, if people were coming to the museum, what would they first experience?
Well, you would first come to the front door of the house. And I encourage anyone who listens to this podcast, as they cross over the threshold to Benjamin Franklin House, actually look behind you at the inside of the front door and the accoutrements that are there. And you'll see that we actually have the original 18th century door locking system, which is a very frightening looking spiral coil and a chain that would have been placed anytime you were locking the door, for example, at the end of the day. So it's fascinating right from the very first steps into 36 Craven Street. You see, as you come in on the right-hand side, something we called Margaret Stevenson's parlor, because actually Benjamin Franklin was not the owner of 36 Craven Street. He was a lodger. But there's this great quote that I like about how he was less a lodger than the head of a household, living in serene comfort and affection. He even had a cat. And as you pointed out, it was a calling card for anyone who was visiting London to come to see and pay their respects to Dr. Franklin, particularly from the colonies. So the house served as the first de facto American embassy. But it's a very wonderful example of a workaday Georgian building. There are really great 18th century grand houses across England that you can visit. This is a good example of something that was maybe not meant to stand the test of time, but did. A little terrace house that's sandwiched in between its neighbors, as you said, circa 1730. And it just shows you that originally the house was about 2.5 rooms deep, and so very narrow, but it was expanded over time. So there's what was called a back closet wing, back closet extension. And that's very visible as you come into our courtyard space. If you're coming in to pick up your tickets or see our shop, you can get a sense of that back part of the building, which was an add-on. But it added more bitty space to what was already a small space. I think the house has had its own will to survive because it's survived a lot. The Georgians thought that when they added that back closet addition, they would take away the mansard roof, which must have looked really lovely, and they put a flat roof on the house. Maybe it was cheaper, I don't know. But it actually was pressing over time on the exterior walls of the foundation. So that was creating some issues. And then when people go into Franklin's parlor, which was the main place that Franklin entertained guests, and it's the only room in the house that has dental molding, because indeed it was not a grand house. So it has some beautiful architectural features like the staircase, which is original, with some beautiful turned balustrades. But other than that, it's pretty plain. So when you are in Franklin's parlor and you look to the two doors that are there, you can look up along the ceiling where the ceiling meets the wall, and you'll see a cut into that dental molding. And that's because the Victorians decided to carve up as much space in the house as possible. So it was built as a lodging house, and that's what it was used as. And actually, at the turn of the 20th century, Benjamin Franklin said that there were two things in life that you could count on: death and taxes. And the Craven family, for whom the street is named, were falling on some hard times, decided to sell the freehold to the building because the landed aristocracy stayed landed because they didn't give away the land on which the building sat. But here they did give what eventually becomes British Rail, then Southern Railway Company, the freehold to the building when they decided to sell. And so they operated the rail company, Benjamin Franklin House, as a small hotel, the Empress Hotel. And that's what it was until the outbreak of the Second World War. But what was happening by the 1970s, because you have this roof which is too heavy, pushing the walls outward, but then you have those Victorians that cut into the main structural beam of the house, causing the walls to bow inward. And then on top of that, more and more water is coming back into the London water table because it's not being pulled out for manufacturing purposes. So you get this destabilization, which is affectionately known as subsidence. And that is causing a real issue for the building. So we were actually on Westminster City Council, which is where we're located. They're our statutory authority. We were on their watch list. They were very concerned that we would be like a building that was diagonally across the street from us, which actually fell down. But because when we were leaning, we could kind of lean onto our neighbor. So I do think it's an awesome responsibility and a great honor to be the director of Benjamin Franklin House. But I do feel that it has had its own will to survive. And in fact, they say that an incendiary bomb fell on the house during the Second World War, but didn't explode. But whether that's actually truth or fiction, we don't know.
Well, as you said, Benjamin Franklin was born 2 centuries too early, and he's got plenty to teach us. And it sounds like the house is a proven fact of that. Plenty to fight for and to show. And you've got some amazing artifacts in there as well, haven't you?
Yeah, we are really driven by the story of Benjamin Franklin House. So we don't actively acquire, but we are delighted with the things that we do have. For example, Franklin's wallet. So when you open it, it says B. Franklin, Craven Street, which is amazing. We also have a medallion that was done by Nini, who was a great artist of the day and a sculptor. And it shows Franklin wearing his coonskin cap. So he liked to exploit his image as a colonial, everyday person. But actually, I'm not sure he ever wore a hat like that, at least not when he wasn't sitting for being remembered in a medallion. But we know that Benjamin Franklin loved to try and dictate to those of us that have succeeded him in how we think about him. So during his time in England, he actually wrote his autobiography, or at least the first part of it. He was friends with a great number of people, and you mentioned some of them in the introduction, members of the Lunar Society. Oh, they were so endlessly fascinating to Franklin, and they were all very similar individuals who were curious, and it didn't matter that Josiah Wedgwood was making pottery in China, or there was an industrialist in Matthew Boulton. They just were curious, and they believed in the scientific method, and they believed in trying and testing and so forth. So Franklin was very much about, in his autobiography, trying to say what he wanted us to know about him. So he talks about, for example, his improvement system, his 13 virtues that he tried as a young person. So he said that if he concentrated on 13 different virtues, one a week, like not talking too much and not drinking too much and lots of other things, and if he concentrated on just that one virtue for one whole week, and then he ran through his course in 13 weeks, that maybe some of this stuff would get ingrained. But he actually found he said that he was much fuller of faults than he had expected. So he also talked about his food likes and dislikes, for example. He talked about how he started out as a young man deciding that he wanted to be a vegetarian, which was very forward thinking. But when he saw that fish ate other fish, he decided that actually he didn't want to be a vegetarian anymore. And another wonderful document that we have to go by in terms of Franklin's life is his Craven Street Gazette, which he wrote as a spoof about life in his London household. And he talks about how his landlady's daughter and son-in-law, when the landlady, Margaret Stevenson, who he called Queen Margaret, had gone away and he was left in their company, that they needed to pool their resources to do the shopping, but he didn't want them to buy roast beef, and he wanted Margaret to get him an ivory-handled back scratcher because beef made his back itch. Or the fact that Polly, the landlady's daughter, almost turned over a tea table in Franklin's parlor. And you can see that the house is secure today, but not particularly level, maybe not in those days either. But it's a really charming set of stories that he wrote for their amusement and for ours.
So we've talked about the letter to his sister and the relationship also with Polly. It sounds like he was actually quite a gentle soul and actually got on with people. A lot of big brains, if you think of Dr. Samuel Johnson, he was rather awkward, the same with James Boswell. But he sounds like he actually really got on with people, not just the brains in society, but women and normal people as well.
I think that's something that's really great about Benjamin Franklin, his congeniality. There's some charming stories about how when he was in France and he had one of his compatriots who was also helping with the negotiations with the French, John Adams, and they have to go out somewhere together on a journey, and they have to spend the night in the same room together. And how Franklin wanted the window open to let the healthful air in. And that's something that children delight in when they come on our school visits, is that we talk about Benjamin Franklin taking an air bath, because he wrote about this, opening the windows and getting up in the morning, being completely naked. Because he thought that was very, very healthful. And he had really forward thinking ideas about the common cold, that if you get in a carriage with a bunch of people who aren't very well, that you might end up sick yourself. And nothing's brought that kind of thing home to us than the COVID-19 pandemic, which we've all been living with over the last year. But Franklin also wanted the window open when he was staying with John Adams. And actually, Adams had a problem with how Franklin was conducting himself, full stop, because Franklin slept in, he was socializing and being charming, and Adams wanted things done in a very rigorous and a serious way. But actually, it was those relationships that Benjamin Franklin was able to develop precisely by being a great conversationalist and being someone, as you say, that people could get on with, that were beneficial to his work.
So, Márcia, thank you so much for your time today. I have really, really enjoyed it, and I've learned so much. Is there any one final thing that you want to share with people listening?
I really like a quote from Franklin's autobiography. It's my favorite series of quotes from Franklin, and forgive me if I don't get it quite right, but Franklin said to resolve to perform what you ought, and perform without fail what you resolve. And I think that those are really great words for living.
And a perfect ending for this episode.